just not see us?
No,
They
can't
should be
see
able to
me.
see you and hear you in the next couple seconds.
Oh.
You refresh. I have 8 viewers.
Yeah, well done.
Can you see?
It's a recording of what happened. Oh, wait. Is it on air? Did you go on air?
I'm on air.
Can you chat somebody and see if
Yeah,
they can
somebody.
tell you if they can?
I have
Okay,
28
now it's-
viewers.
Yeah, now it's playing a ad.
Okay, so it should be back.
So funny because we don't know what you guys are looking at, so we're like, what's happening? But
Someone said, click the link on the email. It seems to be live again.
Okay.
Have it back now. Refresh the video.
Okay.
Replay from
Yay.
point connection lost.
Yay.
And then hold on.
We're back. Okay. Okay, so
Back live.
back live.
All right, Tyler Walker.
Sorry about that. We lost internet connection there for a second. Okay, so Sunita was talking a little bit about the teacher training portion, and then we had a chat about from Christy about Teach for America teachers receiving less training than traditionally trained teachers as something that's a negative. Sarah, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can talk about it. I'm going to give an answer that may be unsatisfying because I'll just say that you can find a lot of criticisms with the length of time and the way that we're able to train our teachers before they come in, but we also hear a lot of positives. So I'm thinking about a principal who I just met with a couple of weeks ago who's a principal of one of our traditional district high schools here in LA, and when I asked him, you know, what do you need from Teach for America? Why do you want to continue working with us? Or is there anything that you would want us to do better? He really said, like, he just wants to keep having our teachers at his school. And I asked him why, and he said the reason is he feels like they are prepared. And he feels like they know their subject area very well, and they get strong training before they come in and during the time that they're in the classroom. So I thought that was interesting because another, criticism you might hear from some people is we have less preparation than you do if you go through a traditional teacher prep program. But from his perspective, he just really felt like the training is very up to date. It's very tailored on like rigorous student learning. And again, like you have ongoing coaching and support while you're in the classroom, which is when the most learning is going to happen as a teacher. And he really likes that facet of our program. My parents both were educators and went through traditional routes into teaching, and so I think they even are people who have definitely had some questions when I said I was going to join Teach for America about the fact that I was going to have a 5-week summer, kind of student teaching experience and then go right into a classroom. But also felt that, the way that I was getting trained was strong in terms of teacher education programs, and that, again, the support that I got while I was in the classroom was really strong from their perspective. And, they just kind of said, like, you can never really fully be prepared for being a first-year teacher, and there's a lot you're just going to struggle with and you're going to need to learn once you're in. And I know we have a lot of criticism in California, specifically around how prepared are our folks to teach students with really high need or students who are English language learners particularly. And so that's something that we're really looking at and just working with LMU, our credentialing partner, to see if there are ways that we can specifically increase the summer support and during the 2 years support on like coursework for our teachers around teaching English language learners. But again, that's something that all new teachers coming in just kind of need to increase their support with. So it's kind of a little of both. And yeah, you went through a traditional
I can add to that also.
route.
So I was a science education major, and I actually did the route of student teaching. I had a semester of student teaching also. And so what I would credit that experience with is I think it made me more comfortable with being in front of students by the time I did Teach for America, because I had already done a semester of student teaching. In terms of content and pedagogy and what I was able to actually execute in the classroom, it's hard to say because there are pros and cons. So one of the things that you have to understand about a traditional teacher preparation program is you take a class or two at a time, a semester at a time, and you don't necessarily get to put into action those things that you learn until potentially a year or 2.5 years later. So in my case, if I learned, if I was in a class about science pedagogy and I ended up teaching a biology classroom in my student teaching experience, I would have to go back 2 years to what I learned prior to that. And as you might know, like a lot of that's foggy. Think about the class that you took 2 years ago and how much of that you remember. What's nice about the core experience, about Institute, is that you learn things that the very next day you put into place. On top of that, like Sarah said, like you actually have a coach who's in your classroom every single day during that 5-week period, who's actually able to give you real-time feedback about how you're doing. In my experience, the teacher that I was under during my student teaching experience, I had what's called a field experience with him the year before, where I probably spent maybe a few hours a month in his classroom. So I got to know him a little bit more. By the time I actually stepped into my formal student teaching experience, about 6 weeks in, or less, I think it was maybe even 3 weeks in, is when I fully took control of the classroom. And then about 6 weeks in, he often wasn't in the classroom. And so I didn't necessarily have somebody who was constantly giving me that feedback. And so I can't necessarily say that my traditional student teaching experience and traditional training was necessarily better.
Jennifer is one of our incoming core members, and she just chatted in that she agrees with Sarah's point. She's done a traditional program and now is doing Teach for America because of the professional development. So we have another traditionally trained teacher joining us. Sunita, can you talk a little bit about what the professional support or the professional development has looked like from your end, and maybe how it might differ from the Institute experience with professional development?
Sure. So I think, well, speaking just earlier to the question that was posed earlier, yes, the amount of support is less, but you have to ask yourself what is going to be more effective. And what I find is that, just like going off of what you were saying, is that you're learning theory while you're in this credentialing program at LMU, and you're also getting to put that into action. Whereas many of us know, coming from undergrad, a lot of the theory we studied in undergrad, we studied for a midterm, we studied for a final. We didn't actually put that into practice. And if it wasn't put into practice, we kind of lost that. What I like about this program is how you can get your credential at the same time. It is a lot of work. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's hard, but then again, you were selected because you have faced an adversity, because you know how to overcome obstacles. Core members that are accepted into Teach for America are successful people, and what makes it more difficult is not that, of course teaching is difficult, but I think what it makes it more difficult is that core members are so used to being successful up until this point that when you start teaching, you're going to see failures. And it's hard for really successful people to face failures every single day, but you just got to pick yourself up. Going back to the training experience though, I felt really prepared with Institute. There's times where you actually like teach, and I've heard of other non-TFA professional development and credentialing programs where you don't even get to teach. Student teachers don't even get put into a classroom, or if they're put into a classroom, they're just sitting there and observing the teacher. At least with Teach for America, you get to teach that class. That class for that day is yours for over those 5 weeks. I think the most meaningful part of the professional development, however, going back to what Sarah said, is not really Institute, but what comes after. After you actually get into your classroom, for your real classroom for that year, you're going to know your students really well. You're going to know what their needs are, and that's where the PLCs come in, that's where the coaching comes in, and that's where MTLDs come in.
You say what those things
Oh, sorry. So after Institute, you're going to have a manager that helps to coach you. And Institute is more of a core-wide professional development, whereas as the year goes on, it becomes smaller. So you get more attention, and then it can even be more individualized. So for example, if you're having a specific problem, you have a coach that you can get from Teach for America to come in and help you with classroom culture. You have an instructional coach to go to email, to text anytime you need help with content or curriculum. And I've utilized both supports. And the Saturday PLCs, which are professional learning communities, you have 5 of them in a year, and you get those opportunities. They become more differentiated, which is also more important, right? During Institute, it's more of a let's teach you the basics, the foundational knowledge that you need to get into teaching, and then as the year goes on, you get more differentiated professional development specific to what your needs are, and because TFA gives you that autonomy to choose what sessions you want to participate in.
Great. Thank you so much, Sunita. That was wonderful. Do you want to jump in, Sarah,
Well,
too?
the only thing I want to say is it's very possible that not everyone does feel that Institute is adequate or that you feel totally successful at Institute. Like there are definitely, you know, I just want to be honest, there are definitely some people who really have a hard time with learning to teach that quickly and being successful right out the gate at Institute, or they feel by the end of it that they're still not prepared to walk into the, you know, their teaching placement in the fall. And honestly, I think it's just important to name that like you need to walk into this experience knowing that it may be really, really challenging, and you may need to like really lean on the people on staff or at your school site, you know, within your school site department chair and your administrator for additional support and growth, because you will be new at what you're doing, and everyone just learns at different rates, and everyone struggles with different things. And so I think don't come in expecting either that we have like a perfect recipe for how to support teachers with being successful in really challenging teaching placements, because we're doing the best that we can and we improve our programming every year, but there are still things that don't go perfectly. And I think as long as you stay focused on I'm really committed to the students and what my students need, and you can kind of weather the storms and the challenges of the things that you may face and struggle, as Sunita said, you will improve over time and you will get better. And we, like, literally you have a team of people on our end and on your school's end who are there helping you improve. But I don't want, like, I do want people to consider that if you really feel like you want a much longer time period of preparation to be a teacher and you want to come in knowing that you're going to be successful right away, then this is not the best route to go, because you are going to have to be learning as you go, and you're going to be, you know, kind of failing and picking yourself back up again. And the reason that we still believe in doing it this way is this is what gets people to the highest need schools, and gets people to commit to teaching for kind of like a bigger picture reason for our students. And we can't get everyone to come to the schools where we need them the most through only traditional teacher preparation routes. So that's why our program exists.
And just to add on to that, I did have my concerns too when I was an incoming core member. So what I did was I actually went back to my middle school, I went back to my high school, I talked to the most effective teachers, the favorite teachers that I had, and I asked them about what they think. And every teacher, no lie, every teacher said it doesn't matter, because regardless of whether or not you've been through a traditional credentialing program, or regardless of whether you're going through TFA, the first year teaching is hard for everybody. You have to just be flexible. You have to be okay with asking for help, for support, and you need to find that mentor. And I think if you have that mindset going in, and a lot of us are so successful, that's the reason why we've gotten accepted into Teach for America, but a lot of us have difficulty asking for help. You need to be open to that. You need to be open to asking for help, and also open to receiving feedback.
So we have lots of questions coming in, which is great. Nancy said, I'd like to hear about their experience on day one in their classrooms, emotions and effectiveness. I kind of want to extend that to maybe like the first month or maybe the first 3 months, like, because it's a really critical time period for a core member's development. Emotions and effectiveness, I like how she's isolated those two things. Any reflections there?
I just had a funny memory that the first day that I was riding on the bus at Institute to my school, I felt like I was gonna faint, like pass out, and I don't think it was because I was like so nervous about teaching. Sometimes I get like low blood sugar or whatever, and I had to like put my head between my knees on the bus, and my Institute staff joked with me later that they were like, oh, you were the girl who we like thought was gonna like throw up in front of the kids on the first day and whatever. So I don't know if that tells you at all about emotions, but I had a little bit of a rough first day of teaching, but I got my energy back and turned out okay. So having 2 first days, right? My first day at Institute and then my first day at my actual school. My very first day I was like super excited and just really wanted to get to know the kids and was super excited about building relationships. And I think
I was smiling a lot, and that came off. I think that set a different tone for Institute, and that led to several classroom management issues, which I can speak to more if you're interested. That set my tone then for the year. Then on the first day, I came in setting those firm expectations, and maybe I didn't come off as happy. My students may have not seen me as someone who was that loving or caring person, but I wanted to set those expectations, and so I was very serious on that first day, and I was all about strictly business that day. But it's worked for me, and classroom management hasn't been an issue since then.
Do you remember that?
I remember lots of I've had probably 4 or 5 first days.
Yeah.
Like student teaching, Institute, first day in the core in Baltimore City. I taught in 2 different schools in Baltimore City. So each time you start in a new environment, it's like reframing, resetting, starting from zero. When I moved to Boston, I was in my 5th year teaching, but I was working with 2 first-year teachers, and I was going from teaching Spanish, because that's what I was teaching in Baltimore, to teaching biology again in Boston. So it was like being a new first-year teacher again. Every single time, I always had anxiety. And I always had a mini meltdown. And the reason why that meltdown came is because I had such high expectations of myself, and I was always like worried about like the worst case scenario. Like, what if I just like fail? What if I have a horrible year? Or what if this is just like not the right setting that I chose? And I would say probably 2 or 3 of those times I was always on the phone with my mom, and basically like just a total wreck like the night before the first day of school. And then she would tell me like, you always go through this. You always have this kind of like moment of doubt, but you always do well. And I think the reason where that came from is like, if you know why you're in it, if you know why you're passionate, like you're going to feel like a lot is at stake, that you just can't fail. And so that might make you feel like, really anxious and really emotional at your first day. But I think if you know it's coming from a good place, it quickly goes away. I even used to have like a certain level of anxiety before each class period started, because I was like, all right, like I have to hit the ground running, and I want like the most effective class possible every single day. And literally 2 to 3 minutes into the class, it was fine. It was no big deal. And actually being in front of my kids, presenting them information that I was passionate about, that I was knowledgeable about, is what I loved most about the job. And so that anxiety always washed away. In terms of the student side, every new environment, every new year, you'll have like what's called the honeymoon period, trying to fill you out. That could last a week, it could last a month. And so it's important during that time to set very clear expectations, so that students know what to expect day in, day out. They know how they're going to be evaluated. They know what kind of environment they're walking into class every single day. And that's what I learned more than anything. I remember and then I'll stop on this piece. When I went into the second school that I taught at in Baltimore City, I remember there was a moment in which I had a class in particular that was really testing me. And I remember I kind of like just stuck with my same messaging, my same systems. And then later on, my kids told me, like, we had to break you, like, or at least try, because that was the mentality that this group of kids had actually developed, because they were very protective amongst their own family. They didn't want to see necessarily a turnover, and they saw like this new teacher coming in, and they had to see what I was all about. And I remember another teacher who they respected highly told me, because you're consistent, because you're the same with every single kid, because you don't waver in terms of what you say you're going to do, it's like they respect that. So.
We have a few questions coming in that just want to clarify some things about MTLDs. The average sort of ratio between core member and MTLD, and then how often they should expect an MTLD to be in their classrooms. Want to take that, Sarah?
Sure. And if you don't know or remember, I don't know if this has gone out in documents from Catherine, and MTLD is a manager of teacher leadership development, and that's what Sunita was talking about, of your person who would be kind of your manager on staff with Teach for America, who is offering you instructional coaching and support and mentorship. MTLDs have about 30 core members for one coach on our team, and so it's and they have many different schools, because they may have one school that has 4 core members at it, and they may have all 4 of those core members, and then at another school they maybe only have 1 or 2 core members, and then another school 1 or 2, etc. So they have a lot of different schools around Los Angeles. So the amount in which they can be in your classroom is a lot less than it is over the summer at Institute, where you have someone there every day, every lesson that you teach, like these guys said. So you're going to need to lean on a combo of support from people who are in your school, on your staff, other teachers or your administration, and Teach for America's MTLD support. And what were some of the other questions? Like, how often do they see you and things like that? For first-year teachers, in the first couple of months that you're teaching, they will be there, I would say, probably in that first month of teaching, probably twice, and then the next month after that, maybe once, and then it kind of like tapers off to more like quarterly, and during your second year, it's a little bit more like quarterly. But it really varies and kind of depends on how much you need. So if you are someone who right away at the beginning of the school year, you just kind of feel like you're struggling getting started, however much you advocate for your MTLD to be present and they're observing you or giving you lesson feedback, they can adjust their schedule to be there more frequently if they need to, and to kind of make more regular visits. Like, there are definitely people at different points in the year that they are there once a week, or they're there for like a full day here and there, just to, like, if you're really working on something that's a challenge for you and you want their feedback after every single lesson. So it kind of varies. I don't know what your experience has been. But
I agree with that. Like, that follows the exact same timeline that I had with my manager. I also just want to add that, like, if you need more support, I have a core member at my school who needed more support. She reached out to our MTLD, and our MTLD was more than happy to come in more often and coach her. And so they're also there. Like, I text my MTLD, I'll email her, call her. It doesn't always have to be in the classroom, right. And so they're there for you. Just reach out to them.
We have a question about, can the panel offer some advice on relating to and building relationships with students when you do not come from a background similar to your students?
Great question. I can talk about that a little bit, because I taught first in Baltimore in a predominantly African American community, which is not where I'm from. I'm from Wisconsin originally, a kind of small city in Wisconsin, and then I taught in LA here in a Latino community in urban Los Angeles. For me, it's a lot about, like, the same way that you would go about building relationships with other people in your life who you want to know and you want them to trust you and you want to work closely with them. You have to do that same thing with your students, and it can be a little more challenging because you have, like, for me, I had 150 kids my first couple of years of teaching, and so you're going to have to invest a lot of time and a lot of yourself into sharing about yourself with them and getting to know things about their lives. And I did a lot of parent outreach, and really, like, I think that's important, not only to signal to students that you have a relationship with their parents, in terms of, like, that you and the parents are on the same page, but also it helps you get to know more about your kids and their family backgrounds and what's important to their families, and just knowing kind of their history and who they are as people. How to specifically do it, I mean, there's a lot of different ways. You do it through little ways in the classroom every day, in terms of, like, the way that you speak to your students, the way that you, even like body language, and the way when you're moving around the room and you're checking in with them while they're working, are you doing it in a way that's loving and that is conveying trust to them and that you're proud of them and you're recognizing their accomplishments? Because those are ways that you build relationships with people. But also it can be things outside of the classroom, in terms of, like, as a reward for your kids, being able to have lunch with you in your classroom, or you spending time with different clubs or activities or things that are extracurriculars with your students. So those are some of the big things that come to mind, but I think for each person too, you really need to figure out, even if this isn't something that's really a strength for you, like, how are you going to use who you are to go about getting to know your kids and having them get to know you, and you may have to get outside of your comfort zone a little bit to do so, because it's really, really important. They're not going to want to work hard and work harder than they maybe ever have before, which is what we hope you are challenging them to do through your curriculum. They're not going to want to do that if if they don't trust you and have a positive relationship with you and don't really know why you're there and what you believe about them.
I would say during my first month, I did a lot of community circles, and I feel like, and that was building relationship with the class and cohort in general, and so it wasn't as individualized, but I felt it was more important for that first month to build a relationship as a cohort, as a class, so that that could support cooperative learning in the future. I also did a lot of, so the first week you'll have a lot of testing, benchmark stuff, and so there was a lot of opportunity for them to, after they're done with tests or after they're done with benchmarks, to write letters to me, and I would respond to every letter that I got. And I think that helped me to build relationships. After that, it got more individualized. As a teacher, you're gonna find that kids will come to you every day to tell you about their stories. You're like busy grading, you're busy like planning for the next lesson, whatever. And it's really important during those times that you stop what you do, or maybe you're really good at multitasking. I've gotten to that point where I've just started multitasking and listening and responding to my students. But for those first few times, just make sure you are stopping, listening to their stories, because they came to you because they trust you. They see you as a person that they can confide in. And just taking opportunities. So if kids ask you to go to their games, go. I've gone to their games when they've asked me. And I would wait for that. I wouldn't try and invite yourself to a game. I would just think that when they eventually trust you and they want you there, they'll ask you, and then you should definitely go. Like, I've had kids who are like, Mrs. Ronnie, stop playing, stop working, can you come play with us? And I would just do it. I would stop working and I would go out and play with them. And I think that really helped to build relationships. But do what's authentic to you, because if you're not gonna, don't be someone you're not and do things that just don't fit your personality style, because if it doesn't, then it's gonna come off as inauthentic.
That's probably the biggest thing that I was going to say. I think being true to who you actually are. So when you think about building relationships with students, how do you build relationships with anybody? Do you act like something you're not, or your genuine self? And then find commonalities, find common ground, find things that you can share together, whether it's a love of music or whether it's a love of art. So again, I come from a low-income background, and I taught in the low-income community, but that doesn't mean that I necessarily share the same experiences as my students. In fact, I quickly learned that my experience with low income was vastly different than the kids that I taught in Baltimore City. And so I couldn't say I couldn't claim to say, I know what you've gone through. And so, don't make the mistake of thinking that you do, even if you share some sort of commonality. With my kids, I reached a lot of my kids, not all of them, but I reached a lot of my kids through a love of music. They found out that I loved hip-hop music and rap just like they did. They didn't believe me. I'd show them my iPod, and then they'd start to realize, oh, okay, there's no way he has 500 songs if he's just, if he likes country. I think, in addition to being authentic, what I've seen in the most effective teachers is they try to get to know their kids, both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And I've heard kids time and time again talk about why they value a teacher so much. And oftentimes it's because that teacher knows them as an individual. They can call out anecdotal information about things that they've shared with them, in class, to basically say I know you, I understand where you come from because of what you've shared with me. I think in addition to that, definitely, again, seeing them as people beyond the classroom. In my third year, I co-coached our school's baseball team. And even though I wasn't necessarily the more athlete versus the two of us as coaches, I saw it as a mentorship opportunity. And it was amazing the relationships that I was able to build with kids back in the classroom and kids that I didn't necessarily always have the best relationship with. That opportunity allowed me to forge relationships in different ways.
Thank you for sharing. So we are entering a time where folks are either have just started the hiring process or about to enter the hiring process. Some folks who are going to be participating in the June hiring event, others who are going to be participating later on this summer. And I feel there's some questions that I've gotten from core members about what they should expect from their school site. I think everyone knows that the core member experience differs from school to school, but what reflections do you all have, and maybe I'll start with Sarah, about expectations for a particular school site that partners with us?
Yeah, this is a really good question because, again, I'm going to offer an unsatisfying answer, which is just that, you know, it varies greatly by school site, and there are some things that I can tell you will likely be true, but it may not be the case for you. And something that I've been thinking about a lot as we particularly, over the last couple of years, we have moved into being in a lot of charter schools in Los Angeles because there were budget cuts in the state of California, and our traditional district schools had to kind of freeze their hiring and were not able to hire new teachers as much. So we've kind of just gone where the need is, as long as our schools are serving students in predominantly low-income communities, and also our schools where performance hasn't been as strong and where there's really a need for teachers to push the bar for performance for kids. Those are kind of our two criteria. So we'll go to charter schools, we'll go to traditional district schools, wherever is really needed. But because of that, the experience of our core members just varies widely, school to school. And I think it can be challenging for core members to hear from your roommate or your friend or someone else in the core that they are having such a different level of support from their administration, or they have a lot of other teachers around them who are really successful and have been teaching for a few years. If you're at a school where it's mostly young or new teachers and everyone's struggling a little bit with classroom management or with figuring out how to be a successful teacher. And so the biggest thing that I would say is you can expect that there will be students at your school who need you to be focused on them and to be the best teacher that you can possibly be in that setting. If you are at a school where you feel like the school is really going through some turmoil and staff members aren't feeling effective and they're not being supported effectively, the more you become kind of focused on those things and the things that are a little bit out of your control, the harder it is to stay focused on the fact that parents are sending their children to that school because that's the best school option for their kids right now in that neighborhood. And I think when you work with the staff member on our end, that's what we'll try to keep you focused on, and we'll try to help you become the best teacher that you can be and become better every day. But we will also try and kind of urge you to focus on the things that are most within your control, which is you as a teacher and the work that you're doing with your kids. Many of our schools, you do get professional development from people in your department at your school, and you have someone else observing you. Sometimes people feel like they have too much support because they've got someone doing that at their school, someone from LMU and their MTLD on our team. And so you could be in that situation, or you could be at a school where you feel like you're not getting enough help to get fast or get better fast enough for, to really feel successful and feel like you're doing a good job with your kids. And so I'll just say that either of those could be your situation, and we believe that we need to be in all of those schools as long as there's a need for great teachers and for achievement to still be higher for the students in those neighborhoods, because we want to be part of raising the bar for performance for our kids, regardless of how much a school is struggling or not struggling. We want to be a part of the solution. So you have to actually come in with an open mind and be ready and willing to do whatever is kind of needed in that moment of that school year for your particular school, given however successful they may be starting to be or however much they may still be really in a period of struggle.
Should I answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I absolutely agree with Sarah. It does vary across school. I hear so many different responses to that same question, and just when I share my experience with other core members, what I would say though is, for example, I'm one of those core members that gets too much support, and sometimes it does become overwhelming. And then there are those that don't, and then that's where you have to, again, reach out to TFA and make sure that you are asking for the support that you need. But the way I would think about this question is ask yourself what any boss would expect from their employee. As a first-year employee, it's coming in on time and before, making sure I get to my classroom an hour before every single day. And staying after school for an hour to sometimes even 3 hours after. I think it shows that you are hardworking. It shows your employer that you are committed to this job. And again, they know that you're not perfect. They know that you're a first-year teacher. So again, they're looking for, like any boss would look for in an employee, is this core member reflecting on their growth? So they don't expect you to be perfect, but they do expect you to take reflection very seriously and the ability to grow very seriously. And also just general things like backwards planning and classroom management, I would say, are the two biggest things that most school principals and site leaders want you to nail down by before you even start your year, like at Institute.
And by backwards planning, for those who don't have teaching experience yet, it just means like knowing what you're teaching for the weeks to come with your students and kind of planning for where you want them to get to by the end of a given unit of study. So if you're taking on, Sunita teaches middle school social studies, so if she's teaching a unit on ancient Rome, knowing what she wants her kids to know about ancient Rome first, and then planning the lessons that she's going to teach to get there, instead of just every night sitting down at home and being like, what should I teach tomorrow?
Which is very, very difficult to do, especially if you don't know your content. If you're teaching, you might teach in a grade level or a content that you're not as, like, I wasn't as well aware of medieval history, which is what I teach, and I was stronger in American history and U.S. government and economics, but I didn't get that placement. And so that is very difficult. Sometimes as a first-year core member, you will only be 5 pages ahead of the students, but as long as you are backward, like you are thinking about what the outcomes need to be for that unit. It's hard, but I think that's the expectation site leaders have.
So another question we have is about balancing teaching and being a student and sort of the general org that is required to be both an excellent teacher for their kids and a student, and also meeting the expectations that Teach for America has. Any thoughts there, Sunita?
So it can be overwhelming for some, but it's doable, it's manageable. Like, yes, again, not gonna sugarcoat it, it's hard, but I'm still alive, I'm still here today, I'm fine. And it's, thank goodness. And I think, again, collaborate a lot, collaborate. One of the difficulties I had, I came from UC Berkeley, which has a very competitive environment, and if you're one of those core members that comes from an undergraduate university that is very competitive, just try and get into that mindset again of collaboration, because TF, like, if you can do that, if you can borrow, steal, and work with other teachers, work with other core members, that will allow you to work more efficiently. So once I started doing that, I was able to manage my time a lot better. I also think that I don't think the workload is that intense. I do think it's very manageable. I think if you had more specific questions for me, I'd probably be able to answer it better. But you go once a week. It's from 4 to 10 for your first year. If you're in your master's or your credentialing classes from 4 to 10. It's a long day. And there will, of course, just like any other course, there's always that part in the middle of the course of the semester where it gets heavy with all of the midterms and stuff. But and we tend to have those presentations and papers. But for the most part, the other weeks, it's fine. And they're very understanding. They're very, very understanding. And a lot of our professors have also done TFA, or they're really well. They are very well versed with the program, and so they are there for you. And again, if you need support, LMU professors will be there to support you, and they understand your schedule. They will give you extensions if it's really necessary.
And I would say we have a lot of core members who have families and kids and other obligations outside of the school hours that you teach. So I imagine this is partially a concern of, like, how am I going to imagine being a full-time teacher in a job that's really demanding, and where you all, along with probably yourselves, are expecting me to be a really excellent teacher, and I'm supposed to be balancing going to classes and doing the reading and writing papers and things like that for classes. I think you're just going to have to really be diligent about managing your time, and also let people know how you're doing. So let your MTLD at Teach for America know how you're doing if you're becoming overwhelmed with anything about the workload at your school or at LMU. Or we know the people at LMU who are in our TFA partnership office there, build a relationship with those people and let them know, this is my life, these are the things I have to juggle, and I just want to check in with you if I'm starting to become overwhelmed by the workload, because we'll help you and make sure that you can get everything done. But I think what you don't want to do is let it all pile up without talking to people about what you're experiencing challenges with. and if you let your school know, us know, LMU know, then I think everyone can make sure that on your really heavy weeks or whatever it is that people are accommodating you.
Okay, so we're almost at time, but I know we started late, so and I want to finish with a couple of quick questions. One is just we had a question on what is the theory of change? They hear that, is that something that's just LA? What does that mean? So maybe Raul, you can talk a little bit about that since it has a lot to do with our alums.
Yeah, our theory of change is very much to do with what we often call like our two-part mission. And so when we think about the first part of our mission, that's the core. That's the core commitment of 2 years. The theory is that it's during that time that core members are able to break a lot of the cycles that continue to take place in a classroom and in a school setting, and basically demonstrate what is possible for our students to achieve during that time. The second part of our theory of change is the longer part. This is the part where we want our alumni to be in this movement on some level for the rest of their lives, because it is that important. And so what it basically hinges on is that time that you spend in the classroom allows you to gain an understanding of what are some of the root problems that exist that manifest itself in educational inequity. What are the policy problems that exist? What are the leadership problems that exist? And it allows our core members to then have an idea of where they're going to align their skills with their passions to figure out how they're going to best position themselves to continue this work moving forward. For many alumni, that looks like staying in a school setting, whether that means a teacher coach, a department chair, a dean, an assistant principal or principal. And for others, it might mean outside of the traditional school setting. So it might mean working for a policy organization or an advocacy organization that is pushing for systemic changes that are ultimately going to influence the educational experience that students get in their K through 12 education. So it is definitely something that basically says, like, in order to break the larger systemic changes, you have to have a really grounded understanding of what the problems are that exist that lead to educational inequity.
Okay.
Hopefully that explains it.
And it's something that's org-wide. It's not necessarily
Yes.
just an LA belief. Okay, thoughts, final things you want to tell our incoming core members? Some of them are awaiting CSET scores, some of them are just entering the hiring process, all of them are anxiously awaiting institute and induction. Things that you want to share with them or things you would like them to be thinking about?
Can I go first?
I feel like
I mean, it's kind of a big, it's like
I
just
know.
one really wise thing to say. The thing that's most on my mind, I guess, with the topics of the call tonight are just to come in really knowing that this is going to be an intense learning experience for you, and we will be learning along with you, the other core members who are working with you, the staff members. But we're really open to like what the challenges are that all of our core members face at their school sites and how we can best support you. And we don't pretend to be perfect or have always a perfect solution to what each person is going to need or why you may feel that this is a challenging experience for you. But we are absolutely 100% committed to our people and to listening to you, working with you, and helping you and your school really be successful for your kids. So just plan to come in knowing that we're people who want to have a close relationship with you and to be an open dialogue about what you need, and that we're really committed to your students, and that means that we're really committed to helping you be successful.
I would just say, just remember that at the end of the day, you're still you, you're still a human being, and make sure, Saturdays I give to Fridays and Saturdays I completely give to myself, give to my family, to my friends, and I always make sure that I am filling my life with those extracurriculars and making sure I'm still staying social, and I think that's good because what that does is it allows you to re-energize. And at some point, teaching, especially your first year, there's always going to be work. Always. It's never going to end, never. So at some point you have to learn when to stop and just give yourself a break remember that you are human, you deserve this break. And if you can do that, I think you can overcome the hardships. I think you'll have an easier time, and and it won't be as bad.
If I had to leave you with advice that could be summed up in a couple words, I would say entrepreneurship and flexibility. I think one of them is a way of being, and the other one is a state of mind. I think I don't even say I think. I know that the most successful core members and alumni in this movement are those who are entrepreneurial in nature. These are people who understand how to leverage resources, relationships, opportunities to make sure that they can get the job done. They aren't people who say like, well, this is an obstacle, so I can't do this. Like, they find a way. They find, like, what is it, beg, borrow, or steal? They know that they figure out what they're in control of, and they leverage that. The second one is flexibility. A lot of things will come your way, whether it's in your classroom, whether it's in your school setting, whether it's in your personal life while you're going through this experience. The people who can roll with it, who understand like this broader mission that they're on, understand that these things pass. And if you don't believe me now, I guarantee you a couple months in, you're going to remember these two words, and you're going to realize that the times that you're getting through these tough patches is because you're being one of these two ways.
Nice.
So wise.
Very wise, Raul. I would agree. So we're going to now end the stream. But thank you for participating. Thank you for the chats. No need to show me a camera. That's just fine. I'm happy off stage. But thank you so much, and have a really good night, everybody. And thank you to our panelists.
Bye.
Bye.
You're so funny.